what disruption is. The entertainment industry is one of the first industries that's really feeling the impact of AI. And if you're on social media these days, you just can't tell what's AI, what's real. So our next session is a fireside chat called Adapting at Scale Through the Lens of a Tech Pioneer. And we'll bring together two thought leaders who have consistently driven innovation from the inside out across many sectors. So please join me in welcoming Phil Wiser, who's the Executive Vice President and Chief Technology Officer of Paramount, and our very own Richard Entrup, who's Head of Emerging Solutions at KPMG. And together they'll explore how emerging technologies like generative AI are reshaping the future of media and what it takes to lead through this massive wave of rapid change and disruption. Before we bring them up, we've got a 3-minute video we want to show to set the stage.
Yeah. So Phil, how much AI was used in that sizzle reel? I want to know.
I'm not allowed to say. No, I was actually, while I was watching it, I was thinking like how many of those things could we modify with AI down the road? And that's what we're thinking about every day. Super interesting, tough subject. That's why AI is not in the title of this talk, by the way, because it's just so sensitive in Hollywood still that we try and just be really careful about how we position things related to AI.
Absolutely. So Phil, I just want to first start with your bio. So Phil has a long career in entertainment media as well as music. Going back probably to the 90s, he's been in startups, founder of what is now digital music and digital distribution of content, both audio and video. He had stints at Sony Music and Sony Corporate, spent a number of years at Hearst Media, joined CBS Viacom, later Paramount. So Phil has had a long trajectory of success within this space and has been a pioneer, but brings very unique perspectives, both from a corporate enterprise perspective as well as startups. I think it's very relevant. But before we go there, there's one other fun fact. Phil was actually in a band called Child's Play, which was a professional rock band.
I was getting worried you were going to put a picture up of
I didn't.
People do that to me every once in a while. It was the 80s, and the hair was really bad.
So I think all of that confluence from your experiences, like the music, creativity, and now sitting at the helm of the largest entertainment media company making decisions around technology and business. Share a little bit about all of that, how that comes together and how you apply all of those tenets of your interests, both personally and professionally, towards your success.
Yeah, I feel like my corporate stint, if you caught that last bit when Tom Cruise was diving into the ocean, I feel like that's me diving into a media company as it's about to blow up, because I've done that multiple times. So I joined Sony Music after I sold my first startup, which was an internet music company, as CD sales, which is our single source of revenue, were dropping 30% per year. And I just love going into those moments because that's where you feel like you can add a lot of value. But I've spent my whole life in some form of media. And what really drove my early career, even before post-musician career, as I got into technology, was really just the perception of reality, not to get too spiritual on you, but I was really fascinated about how humans process reality, and media is such an impactful version of that I just went really down the rabbit hole of neuroscience, electrical engineering, signal processing applied to audio video, and really deep on psychophysics, which is the technology of how we perceive our environments through generally our senses. And then all of that led into landing at Stanford. I was doing my PhD in electrical engineering, and I took a summer stint to build a product at a startup. And I built the product, went to a trade show, and somebody bought it, and it just changed my life. It's like, I can build something, people buy it, and then I just got the startup bug, and that ultimately led me to start my first company, which was at the beginning of Internet 1.0, where we had this idea that was really artist-driven, that we could use the internet to break off the shackles of the big media companies from artists and connect those artists directly with consumers through the internet. And ultimately, that played out. It took a lot longer than we expected, but it was that sort of drive of like how the art connects with consumers through the application of technology is really what's driven me and kept me motivated. And even now, as I'm like going into a new merger that we're not going to talk about too much, it's a new opportunity, right, to rethink what a media company's role is in the world and how as a big media company, you actually add value.
Sure.
And I'll just relay one little fun thing around that happened to me when I was at Sony Music, because I was feeling a little bit like a corporate suit, at Sony Music. I'm like, oh, I went to the dark side. I'm at a label now. And I ended up, at that point, I was pitching the future of music, which was going to be on mobile. And at that point, mobile couldn't really do much. But I had this whole song and dance of technology and music, and the label said, hey, Prince is playing Madison Square Garden. We want to get his next album. Can you do your whole tech thing? So I did, and went in before the show at Madison Square Garden, pitched Prince on the future of music, and I got so excited about the potential of him as a real entrepreneurial artist connecting with his musicians that he got all jazzed up. And he invited me, to join him at his, after party that he has after his big shows. And I'm sitting at the table with him here and the two, presidents of the labels over here, and we're like jamming a little bit. He's like, you and me, we're the artists. They just bleed off of our artistry. And I got so pumped about that. It's like, I can be in a media company as a technologist and actually have someone of that caliber kind of see the value I'm bringing. And that sort of kept me going.
Sure. I mean, Prince called himself.
I got a ton of those stories. But.
I mean, Prince called himself the artist for that purpose, right? Because contractually, that's all he felt. So again, back to the entrepreneurial startup that you were in the Valley for a while for the second startup. Like, how do you bring that forward now in your current role? Like, large organizations don't innovate and disrupt themselves very well. So you bring this startup, agile, disruptive nature to your current role. How do you find that? Trying to herd the cats, if you will, and influence those bold decisions to disrupt themselves moving forward in your sector.
Well, I think the key thing is kind of where I started. You have to pick the right company that's willing to admit that they need to dramatically change. If you're going to go into a company that feels like they've got it all figured out, it's going to be nearly impossible as a technical leader to drive that change. So I do pick those moments, and then when I joined Sony Music as a follow-on to that, I saw that panic in the eyes of the executives. When I was meeting with this, Tommy Mottola was the CEO at the time, I could see that they had no idea what to do. And I was like, I can really help. What was interesting is a counterpoint to that, after we were successful at building a digital business there, they said, go to Sony Corporate and help Sony compete with Apple, because Apple had just released the iPod. They were killing the Walkman business, which they felt like they had the right to own digital music. But they were so arrogant that there was no way I was going to convince them that they stunk at software, they were horrible at services, and they built beautiful hardware. But if they didn't get the other two elements, they were going to fail, and you just couldn't hear it. Yeah. So I learned a lot from that failure on my part of sort of like not really reading the room well. And so what I do now is I invest a lot of time in educating everyone around me and not having that startup mindset of like every morning I wake up with a sense of urgency, but I can't just run by myself. Sure. I have to really make sure every day I'm investing in other people around me to make sure they understand like why I think this is going to be important. Right. The other thing that I've really learned over the years now is timing, like being really careful about what you're going to hype up in terms of timing. And for AI, for example, I was at Hearst, and the last wave of AI, because I've been focused, as I said, on neuroscience and forms of AI for many years. But in 2017, I got really jazzed at Hearst because that was really the first moment where we could build models to really identify images reliably and build products around it. So we had a magazine business, we had a lot of financial information services businesses, a lot of medical information services businesses. And I said, look, this is really going to disrupt everything we do because we have a lot of people generating written and visual content. That's going to change. Now, I was right. I was a little early, though. But they did listen to that, and they actually built out some capabilities that prepared them, I think, to a large extent for what happened, obviously, in 2022.
Sure. I don't want to segue to AI just yet, but we're going to go back there because it's a rich subject, especially within your sector. So tell us a little bit about culture within your organization. You've got a couple of thousand people in your org.
Yeah.
How important is culture within the technology organization relative to your great demand on disruption? You got IT keeping the lights on, you've got the streaming business that has to grow subs and revenue, and everything in between. How important is culture towards that success of making all that work?
I always start with culture, and this is sort of a startup thing. We always say, focus on the culture that's going to drive change. In a startup, it's a lot easier. But there's a couple elements to it that I haven't perfected yet. Because I like having safety on my teams. I want people to feel safe, to express their ideas, to take risks. but I also want them to have a healthy dose of fear that change is coming, and they have to have a sense of urgency around continually innovating. So I intentionally inject disruption into the ecosystem of our teams to keep people, willing to move. Because I found you're certainly going into existing large teams and being the change agent. If you don't move things around and people stick with their ossified structures, it's really hard. It's really hard to win that battle.
Machiavelli Prince proverb of trying to change hearts and minds of you have a legacy organization, you're the new leader that wants a change agent, and you've got to bring in new people, and balancing that could definitely be a challenge. What about financial management?
I just had one more thing too, since you brought up princes. So there's also, I think, a key thing of leading from the front of the battle. Like I, obviously manage big teams, billion-dollar plus budgets, but I definitely will dive in when there's a moment where either we have a crisis or a big opportunity, showing that you're willing to go deep, and with a technical team, showing that you've got the capability to go deep technically with humility, because I recognize my limitations on that. That makes a big difference. So I think having credibility with your team, that you're willing to invest 24/7, that's been a big part of what I think is built a good culture around my team.
Could not agree more. Techies really look up to that, especially managing a technology organization. You need to be hands-on and at the helm of everything.
Yeah.
So let's shift real quick on financial management. I've worked for CFOs as well as CEOs as a CIO, CTO. Much preferred the CEO over the CFO for obvious reasons. How important is financial management and discipline to getting what you need? You probably present to the board as well if there's a big enough number for a major transformation. So how does that all come into play, reporting structure-wise and governance, getting you what you need is from a budget perspective and capital?
Well, one thing I do when I mentor other CTOs is primarily on finances. Because when you come up through a technical track, you're not really focused on that element. So I insist that they read a couple of good books or study online. Now go to AI and O3 and learn about venture investing models and how to feed a team just enough money to get to the next step, but never overfeed that team.
Sure.
Because I think that happens a lot in big companies. We think, oh, we're way behind, we're going to throw money at it, and it rarely works. And we've got great examples of fantastic failures of teams that were built too quickly. Sure. So I do always, when I go in and form a technology group, form a dedicated financial team. Certainly with cloud, with FinOps, a very sophisticated team that's doing real-time analysis of where our spend is going has been a key part of that. Because I feel like if a big technical decision is going to fall to the CFO, giving a green light, I'm doomed. It's never going to work. Right?
Sure.
So I have to be in the driver's seat when it comes to the finances and where we're making our investments.
Could not agree more. So for the sake of time here, I think we got to go to Gen AI specifically. I've been deep down the rabbit hole, as you know. You and I probably talked about this in early 2022 before anyone heard of ChatGPT. I had been an early beta tester for a lot of the early products, got into Stability very early on. I think I connected you with Emad, the founder of Stability back in the day.
You did, that was an eye-opener.
Yeah, and so much has changed in a really quick period of time. And the big test of how fast the technology is changing, how many folks have seen the Will Smith eating spaghetti video? The original one from 22. Not many. So if you look at that same video now, generated with AI, it looks real. And that's a 3-year snapshot. So the trajectory of change in this technology is breakneck speeds by any, I think, relative to anything. And we've seen cloud, we've seen mobile, we've seen the internet. We go back. All of these inflections in the technology landscape have really caused disruption. This one feels different. The capital investment going into AI, the acquisitions, the numbers, the valuations are just like we've never seen before, and it's not letting up right now. All your VCs are still pretty much focused on AI from an investment perspective. So it's the other interesting point I'll add is that of all the sectors I thought would be disrupted, I think a lot of folks didn't think the creative field would be hit first, and that's how it turned out for some reason. Images, videos,
I kind of
music.
did.
What's that?
I did.
I'm sure you did, but so here we are, and now I think Hollywood and filmmaking is now shifting from fear and concern to FOMO and, oh my God, I got to start doing this. We've got some big names like James Cameron joined Stability's board. We've got Ed Ulbrich joined Moon Valley. Ed Ulbrich is a big name in Hollywood. He did the Benjamin Button's reverse aging effects, which took like 150 days. And He's doing the same things now with Gen AI in like, I don't know, a couple of hours. So it's
Right.
tremendous efficiencies in film production. It's all about cost. Dubbing is a very expensive cost. So what's happening there? How is it being adopted? What are the challenges still for it being embraced? And where do you see, where are things now? Where do you think it's going? And it's
A lot in
loaded
so,
question.
so I'll unpack bits and pieces of that. So I like the fact that you mentioned FOMO, because FOMO is the most powerful force besides nuclear forces in Hollywood. If you want to get something done, inject FOMO, see what happens. So we're starting to get that momentum now because we've got these, strong creators that are proving that you can do interesting things. And I think we're at the beginning of what's going to be a real creative explosion with AI. Because everyone, we talked about this in 2023. We listed out all the use cases from pre-production all the way through to post-production and distribution where we could apply AI. And they're all interesting, but they don't fundamentally change the way you make or tell a story.
Right.
And I think we're at the beginning of a shift from, in Hollywood, if you're making a movie, it's a very waterfall process. And that's why it takes multiple years to get a story refined in text, maybe create some imagery, create a storybook. And then even after you've shot all the live action on that, it could be another year where you're doing post-production visual effects. And if you want to change that story at the end of the process, it's very expensive. So there's a lot of risk reduction that happens early to make sure you're not making changes at the end where it's very expensive. We're about to enter a phase, and this is Phil's theory, and I don't know if anybody's going to buy it, but I think it's going to happen, where it's going to become very agile. And a lot of the actual near final visualization is going to happen very early with AI-generated pre-visualization. So you're going to be able to iterate on a story and see what it looks like, see how that story change shows up on the screen, and get a lot more iterations in terms of even testing with audiences early to refine the story before it goes out.
On set. I mean, live, real time, not go back for the digital dailies every day, send back real time ability to see what's happening and actually make some minor AI and edits potentially.
Yeah, and I think that, that kind of real time feedback loop is going to impact our ability to be more risk takers.
Yeah.
Right, because I think we've all lamented a little bit that the franchises that come out, the superhero movies that come out, there's a limited number of risks you can take because you're not willing to try out a new idea.
Right.
Maybe, and this is a dream, maybe that will shift when you can take some more risks with a different type of story and get more confidence that you can invest and market against that early on.
Well, the franchises are worried, right? Franchises meaning Mickey Mouse or SpongeBob in the case of Paramount. Each of these assets is worth billions of dollars across the channels. You've got film, television, parks, theme parks, and they track these franchises, these characters through the channels. It's billions of dollars each, retail, what have you. So let's shift a little bit. Build versus buy, let's say AI or anything else for that matter. How do you decide whether to build in-house or whether to partner with either big tech companies, Google, Amazon, what have you, or perhaps partner with startups and VCs? And what's the decision criteria for what's best for you to get things done in your space?
Well, I think number one for us is our capacity to invest in something that's truly differentiated. And if I can do that and convince myself I'll do it, I'll build it. When we went down the path of cloud, we went all in with Amazon. When we merged CBS and Viacom into what is now Paramount, that was the big trend that we invested against. And it was clear that Amazon was going to be the market leader for any duration that we cared about at that point. So we went all in with them, and I got Andy Jassy to invest in us, which is, when you're in Hollywood, other people's money is a great thing. So getting Amazon to invest in our future moving to the cloud was a great outcome.
Sure.
So if you've got partners that are willing to invest in us, that's another criteria. Now, on the AI side of things, clearly the foundation model providers are ones that we're going to stay very close to, and we have for the last couple of years, because we're really not sure who's going to end up winning. It's been an interesting jockey between OpenAI when they came out with Sora last February, changed everyone. That's the first time I got phone calls in the company, can you get me a demo of AI video? But then Google came out with VO3 and blew the market open. And now I think there's going to be competition potentially from Elon Musk. I mean, he's talking about video on X quite a bit.
He posted today, he's got some video models coming
there. There you go. See, I wasn't.
And there's Pika and Kling and a whole bunch of others. And they're all kind of equally the same. Now you can do motion capture and things like that. It's pretty amazing.
Well, what's going to be interesting for us then is so those models are trained on a large corpus of video content, but they're not trained on our franchise deep content. So the question for a big media company sitting on a pile of high quality data is how much should we build in our own models to augment what we can get out of general purpose models. And there's a very interesting theory, like when you're early on in the storytelling process, your models need to understand the universe because you never know what you're going to ask them to do. As you get further down the pipeline, they only need to understand what is in SpongeBob's universe.
Right.
So you can use lower cost models that are higher fidelity to that smaller world that they need to deal with. Right. And that's what I'm looking at now is like, when do we move off the big foundation models to something more proprietary that's unique to us and, you know, our IP.
Spot on. Narrow but deep, fine-tuned based on your franchises within all the different channels. Because if you try to do a SpongeBob video or an image on the open foundational models, you might get SpongeBob that looks a little bit like Mickey Mouse. They're all mixed and mashed up.
Right.
Spot on. We're actually helping a client right now figure that out. So it's a very exciting time for sure. What do you think, is Gen AI the big disruptor now? So innovation happens, I think, within an organization. Disruption happens at the edge of an organization. How do you see that from an innovator's dilemma type Clay Christensen perspective? What do you think is within Paramount or in general in the media segment? What are those signals that are coming? Is there anything else besides Gen AI that's going to disrupt the future of entertainment media, you're thinking?
Well, I think like just video capture technology will continue to evolve. So obviously, you know, we've got these big LED walls behind us. We're using those virtual volumes pretty extensively now, and we can fill those volumes up with AI-generated imagery to place live action in any environment that we want ultimately. So I think, you know, the actual core, you know, presentation and capture of video is going to continue to evolve.
Right.
The big thing that we're all waiting for is, well, what is the next consumption device? Right. When do we move beyond that 2D display, whether it's in your hand or hanging on your wall? We haven't cracked it for a couple decades. Mark Zuckerberg hasn't cracked it yet. But, you know, we're staying close to that because we think that could be really interesting.
Glasses,
things get
maybe.
Much more immersive, yeah. It could be glasses. I don't know what it's going to be. It could be a Neuralink implant. Who knows? But I think, you know, that type of immersive storytelling is going to get really interesting.
So on that same note, at this pace of change right now, and again, Gen AI is 80 years old. Generative AI is probably 3, 4. Gen AI was actually happening, as you mentioned, long
2017, I opened the conference with generated music.
Right.
It was horrible,
right.
But you know, it proved that we could do it.
So where are we? I mean, again, the Will Smith scenario, that first Will Smith video only 3 years ago was unwatchable. It was just kind of funny to watch. Now it looks like it's real. So where are we 3, 5, 10 years out with this stuff?
We got to remember, like, and this has, you know, been my sort of success and failure. It's like timing's the hardest thing to predict in any of these trends, and the technology's not going to be the limiting factor. The humans will be. Right. Their ability to absorb and adopt and create with this technology is going to be what is limiting, and maybe what even breaks it open. So, you know, everyone's talking about the Pixar moment. Like when there's a company that puts out something as breakthrough as Pixar did with their 3D high resolution animation with AI. Right. I don't know if that's going to happen in a year or 5 years.
The next thing.
Then something of that creative output that really breaks the market open and drives, you know, a big shift in Hollywood.
Was going from traditional filmmaking to, let's say, CGI, like Jurassic Park, the first Jurassic Park movie. That was a big jump in the ability to create things, and the cost went down tremendously. Is that that's the gap?
Right, and there's barely a film now that does not include something like that.
Right.
Unless you're Tom Cruise, who's willing to do everything on his own. But,
so I've got one more bonus question before we put it out to the audience. Like, what data or data sets do you think a Disney or a Paramount could unlock with AI that might provide, like, well, I guess you just talked about that new user experience. I guess we just touched on it, really. Just it's the consumption product, whatever it is, the way we consume the content, right, ultimately.
Well, I think, you know,
cars are going to be another big channel. Auto's going to advance. Those screens are still somewhat cumbersome and not great.
Yeah.
let's face it. So they're going to evolve, I think. The the ability to do stuff in the car.
I think stories are going to emerge out of our existing content
Right.
that would not otherwise come to fore. So, Star Trek's always a great one. I've used that even before I was at Paramount as an example of a very rich universe
Right.
that's been created over many decades. If you're feeding all of that into an AI system and you want to explore that universe and sort of extrapolate into other parts of that universe,
Sure.
you can probably do it in very interesting ways. Now, what's really cool is because if you got a fandom at the scale that something like a Star Trek does, they all enter in and start shaping that
So
universe.
crowdsource it
Yeah,
and then personalize it. I can make my own Star Trek episode.
And all the big internet successes dating back to CDDB, if anybody remembers that, were all powered by free labor over the internet. So, we're looking for something like that.
Sure.
I think that's going to be super interesting.
So content real quick, AI, copyright. We've got a session coming up on Thursday. We've got one of the leaders in the space. I think folks like Ed Olbrich I mentioned at Moon Valley, they're using licensed content. That's going to be an interesting area to track, I think, that keeps this from being adopted. But it's being worked out fast, for sure.
Yeah, we've been here before. There was this thing called YouTube that I think a few people, including my company, sued
Right.
at the time. So I think we're trying to be very thoughtful about it, and I'm not going to obviously speak on any specific legal points.
Right.
We will hold on to all of our rights as much as we can, but we're engaging with these companies. And I think you find the cases where there is litigation now, it's generally when the tech companies just recalcitrant. They're like, I don't care. I'm not changing anything. I'm not even going to talk to you.
Right.
The ones that are serious and are scaling are actually having a meaningful conversation. So I think we'll find the right benefit there. But look, whether an AI system or Photoshop outputs something that directly infringes our copyright, there's a problem, right? So I think if you're looking at what's being created through the lens of copyright, it gets pretty clear into what's acceptable and not
Sure,
acceptable.
for sure.